Welcome to the Western PA Work Injury Podcast.
Welcome to Western PA Work Injury Podcast with attorney Michael S. Russell. With 33 years of experience representing injured workers across Western Pennsylvania, Mike focuses on helping clients navigate workers' compensation claims and protect their income and benefits after a workplace injury. I'm Lisa Mosbey, your host, and today we are talking about what to do immediately after a work injury in Pennsylvania. Mike, thank you so much for joining me for this topic today.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Before we get into the steps, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and the kind of workers' compensation cases that you handle in Western Pennsylvania?
Sure. I always start with my background with all my pictures behind me. All the judges love it when we do hearings with those pictures. So I've been practicing for 33 years, but I got two young kids, an 11 and a 13-year-old, and they provide that great artwork behind me. In terms of my practice, I graduated in 1990 from Grove City College, which is just up the street here from Western Pennsylvania. Graduated from Regent University School of Law in Virginia in 1993. Got my license then and started here in Greensburg, representing actually the insurance companies in workers' compensation claims. So I was on the wrong side of the fence for the first couple of years of my practice. Fortunately, I ended up deciding to change, and I moved into a firm in downtown Pittsburgh and spent 2 decades in Pittsburgh representing exclusively injured workers and people trying to get on Social Security disability. That firm was a massive work comp firm. We were one of the giants of the work comp industry. So in that time frame of 20 some years, I probably represented over 10,000 injured workers. Now back here, I'm in Western Pennsylvania still. I've moved back to where I started, which is the firm I'm in that I started with in 1993. And I've been here for 7 years now and running both the workers' compensation practice here at this firm, as well as our Social Security disability practice. Litigated pretty much every kind of case you could possibly imagine in the world of workers' compensation before what we call workers' compensation judges on this side of the state or on this state. We handle probably 6-8 hearings a week. I've litigated cases all the way through the Commonwealth Court and Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. The only other thing that I would say is important to know about the background when you're searching for a work comp lawyer is in Pennsylvania, we are allowed to obtain a certification as a specialist in the practice of work comp. That came into play in about 2014 and 2015. I had to take a test for that. So you took a test to establish your proficiency in this topic. And I passed that test, and I am now certified as a specialist. We get recertified every few years. I think my last certification was about 2 years ago. And then we have to take a certain required number of credits. We call them continuing legal education in the field of workers' compensation, so we keep our knowledge base up. So I currently represent injured workers across all of Western Pennsylvania, from Erie to Washington and all the way out to State College, halfway across the state.
Wow, it's an honor for me to be sitting with someone who has as much experience as you do. I want to jump into this. Right after someone is hurt on the job, what should be the first thing they do?
Okay, well, that's easy because we see the failure in this part often. Is the very first thing anybody needs to do when they get injured is notify their employer. We have 120 days, 4 months in the Commonwealth to report injuries. But we don't want to wait to do it. And what unfortunately will happen is people will wait for various reasons. Sometimes they don't want to affect their employer. They don't want to get into trouble. They don't want to have the employer angry at them. Sometimes they don't think their injury is big enough to do anything with. My advice to anybody when they get hurt is to immediately notify your employer, even if you don't think your injury's serious. Obviously, we don't want to run and report a hangnail. But if it's an injury of any substance, you need to get notice to your employer. You need to let them know what happened. Second step on that is typically they need to get some treatment. What people often do for some of those same reasons. They don't want to get treatment. They're afraid it's going to make the employer mad. They don't want to miss work, all those sorts of things. They delay getting treatment. While there's no requirement that you seek immediate medical care, I would suggest that if you have a condition that requires care, that you no matter what, go get that treatment. Um, in each of these circumstances, while we don't have an immediate requirement to give notice and we don't have an immediate requirement to get treatment, um, the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to establish that what you're dealing with 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road is related back to that original injury. Because if you don't go to the doctor or you wait 2 months to report the injury, first thing the insurance company is going to say is, wait a minute, this goes back to something they did at home. Why didn't they report this? So while you have those time frames and you don't have to run out immediately and give notice, my recommendation, of course, is that you do, because it creates that paper trail, I would call it, so that you don't end in some of those issues that we talk about. Um, Thirdly, I would suggest that anybody that has any reasonable injury, get a lawyer. It's important to get a lawyer quickly. Um, Most people don't want to hire a lawyer. They're afraid they don't have money to pay for it. They don't know how they're going to pay for the services. The reality in Pennsylvania and in workers' compensation matters is we handle claims on a contingency fee basis. Every lawyer that I know of that does workers' compensation, and I'm sure every lawyer does it the same way. We get paid based upon what we get for our clients. And so one of the things you need to make sure is that you know your rights. And that goes back to the things we've already talked about, these notice issues. If you don't call a lawyer and you wait 4.5 months to give notice, doesn't matter how bad your injury is, you're out of luck. And so you can contact a lawyer, you can talk to lawyers in most cases without having to pay any upfront fees. And they're able to give you, if you get somebody that does workers' comp, they're able to give you a lay of the land so that you know what you need to do and what not to do. And kind of the last thing I always recommend to people is keep a journal. Uh, in many cases I've litigated over the years, we might have uh, a claimant, which is an injured worker in Pennsylvania, saying they told somebody about the injury, or they did this with somebody, or they had this injury on this date. Employer comes in and says, we don't know about that. And the benefit of having that diary is you have something so that you keep these things fresh in your memory. You can remember them sometimes when you're getting to testify on your case 6, 8, 10, 12 months or more later, and you're trying to remember what happened a year ago. It becomes very, very difficult. So keep a journal, keep track of who you talk to, what you tell them, when you talk to them, when you see the doctor. That helps your lawyer be prepared, and just keeps you moving in the right direction as your claim proceeds.
Mike, we never know how the body's going to respond, do we? We may not feel bad today, but if we don't get out there and be seen by a doctor or documented, it can be we could be in trouble down the road when we do need medical attention. But I'm curious, what does Pennsylvania law require when it comes to reporting a work injury, or how can mistakes at that stage affect the claim?
There's no um, magic words per se. There's nothing that you have to say to your employer of any great detail. You don't, oftentimes, as you've indicated, Lisa, we may not know what injuries we have. We just know we have some pain here in my neck, or I have some pain over here. What you need to notify the employer is, I got hurt at work, preferably tell them how, and tell them what hurts. That's basically it. So it's not much, but it's really critical that you let them know what happened to cause you to get injured. If you come in and say, my back hurts, and this has happened countless times in my career, I can't even tell you how many times somebody will go to the employer and say, my back hurts, or my elbow hurts, or my shoulder hurts. The one requirement is you got to let them know that this happened at work and how it happened. Doesn't have to be a 10-minute diatribe, but they have to know that you got hurt, what the injury is, and how you got hurt.
And then when it comes to choosing where to go for that, do you select someone from your insurance? How do people know where to go and who to seek out for that medical treatment?
Pennsylvania has a system called panel physician lists in workers' compensation claims. So when you get hurt at work, assuming the employer, there's some background things that they have to do that would be really getting into the weeds for our purposes today, but they have the right to limit you to seeing one of their physicians on their panel. After your injury, if they have a panel list, they have to provide you that list, and it typically would have 5 or 6 different physicians in different types of treatment specialties, you have to go to one of their doctors for the first 90 days. What we see happening here in Pennsylvania a lot right now, particularly at least where I work in Western Pennsylvania, we have what are called managed care organizations. They are organizations that have an office and they treat almost exclusively work injuries, and they'll have different doctors within that specialty. In my opinion, technically, that is not a panel list, but during that first 90 days, we're a little bit under the um, requirements of the system to treat with what I would say is the employer physicians. That can change dramatically and it can change quickly. If the employer chooses through their carrier to deny your case, you have an automatic right at that point, as soon as a denial is issued, to pick and choose who you want to go to. Um, Also, during that first 90 days, let's just assume that you're seeing one of their surgeons for a shoulder problem. He recommends that you get surgery. You have an absolute right to get a second opinion, even during those 90 days with a physician of your choosing. The limitation is, however, if you go to your physician and he says, "Hey, I think you need surgery," guess what? You have to go back to that panel physician and have the surgery through that person. Typically, what we're doing is treating with the company physicians during those first 90 days. Once we get past that 90 days, we get people off to their own physicians.
I'm wondering typically what happens. How do employers or insurance companies typically respond in the early stages of a claim? And what should someone watch for that could affect their case?
I would say in response, Lisa, there's no typical. There are a number of things that we call, when I refer to an employer, that includes their insurance company. It's an insurance policy, just like your auto insurance. Sometimes employers don't report the accident to their carrier. The carrier doesn't know, they do nothing. Sometimes the employer reports it, but the carrier just doesn't do anything. The adjuster's too busy, nothing happens. They are supposed to, the insurance companies in Pennsylvania are supposed to make a decision within 21 days of when somebody is off work, what they're going to do with their claim, whether they're going to pay it, not pay it, deny it, whatever. Um, what should happen within that first 21 days is they should issue one of a couple choices. First choice is they issue a denial. Common misconception is, I get hurt at work, I get paid. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Hear that all the time. That's not the law. The insurance company in Pennsylvania has the absolute right to deny it. 5 boxes, they pick one of those boxes and issue a denial, and then it becomes the claimant's burden to prove his case. Um, if they choose to accept it, they're typically, this is one of the typicals I will give you, Lisa, used to be in the old days when I practiced, we had only a notice of compensation payable. So once an employer picked up a claim, they were stuck until a judge let them out. And what that engendered was the employers would typically deny it because they didn't want to get stuck and they didn't have 3 weeks or so to investigate. So a system got put into place called a notice of temporary compensation payable. Notice it's that same 90 days. And so in that first 90 days, they can issue a notice of temp. They can accept the case for medical or wage or both, but they have 90 days to investigate the claim and change their mind. So you're looking for those notices from the insurance carrier as to whether they've denied it, as to whether they've accepted it, or whether they do nothing. Hence, we go back to why you need a lawyer at the outset.
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking about how many cases you've seen over 33 years. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see people make right after a workplace injury?
It would go back to what we've already talked about. Failing to give notice. Everybody wants to keep employed. Everybody needs their job. Everybody needs to pay bills. Um, Many people can't be out of work for 2, 3, 4, 5 months or 5 weeks and not get a paycheck. And so I would say the most common issue is people don't want to report their injury, or they don't want to treat. They don't want to follow up on it. They might go report it and then just leave it sit there. They won't go follow up and get the medical treatment that's going to be necessary down the road if it turns out to be an injury that requires some significant treatment. If it's a minor injury, those things might not come back to haunt somebody, might not come back to hurt you. But if you have a slap tear in your shoulder, it's going to hurt. But countless individuals over my 33 years of practice have decided not to tell their employer. Common thing I hear all the time is, it hurt, but I thought it was going to get better. As you said, Lisa, you never know what's going to happen in terms of your body. People get in car wrecks in a little 5-mile-an-hour accident and end up with neck surgery. So people will often not report their injury. They won't go get treatment. We can fix some of those problems if we do it relatively soon. We can serve notice for 3.5 months out. Again, the problem is the longer you wait, including getting your medical. Let's just say you give notice 2 months in, but you don't get your first medical care until 6 months or 8 months down the road. It is really, really hard at that point to then try to point to the work injury way back there as being the source of the problem that you're now seeing the doctor for.
Mike, I have to tell on myself. I'm guilty of that. It happened years and years ago, but I had a slip and fall. They were mopping and I fell at work and I didn't realize I had hurt my shoulder. 3 years. I never told anyone and had to go through all the medical treatment, paid for it all myself. So if you need a testimonial to back you up on what it is that you're saying, I'm a real life example. And I know you see this all the time. Can you walk us through a real example that you had to defend or you pursued when in the early steps somebody they didn't help their case?
Yeah, I would say one of the common examples we see on this is people with what we would call repetitive trauma injury. There's a lot of dispute whether carpal tunnel comes from use of your hands, but we still argue over that. But somebody might do a job. I actually had a case recently where repetitive lifting, they don't have an acute trauma. People with an acute trauma are more likely, not always, but more likely to report their injury. Even in those cases, many times people refuse to go report their injury, even though they had an acute injury. But what we do see oftentimes is people will have a repetitive trauma. They've done a lot of lifting at work. And so their body hurts. They keep working, their body hurts a little bit more, and they just don't notify their employer that this pain started. And so then we end up litigating, and I've litigated, I probably list off 100 cases where we've litigated where people failed to get medical treatment. I have one actually right now where my client didn't treat. He treated initially, and then he waited about 18 months to go back to the doctor. He needs surgery now. We're fighting now to prove that what he has now goes back to what happened back then. Even though he was in pain all along, he was a tough guy and wanted to keep working and didn't get treatment. Becomes really, really, really hard to now point back to what happened a year and a half ago as the cause of his problems. We all have degeneration. We all have arthritis. At my age, definitely. At younger ages, your bones are starting, your joints are starting to have arthritis, and it gets really, really difficult. And I can assure you the employer is going to get a doctor on their side who's going to examine you one time. And he's going to look at your records and say, you're 50 some years of age. That problem has nothing to do with what you did back then. It's a result of the arthritis in your shoulder. And if they win on that argument, big fat zero.
Mike, we're going to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for walking us through some of these key steps that folks can actually take to support a case.
It's my pleasure.
That's it for today's episode of the Western PA Work Injury Podcast. If you've been injured at work and have questions about your rights or next steps, you can learn more or get in touch with attorney Mike Russell at attorneymichaelrussell.com. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.